So we've been talking about angles and angle measure, and so far we've talked about angles in standard position. That's an angle whose initial side is on the positive x-axis. We've talked about the initial side of an angle and the terminal side of that angle, where the angle begins and where it ends. And we've talked about coterminal angles, angles that start and end in the same place. But you may be wondering, what does this have to do with trigonometry? Well, that is where the reference triangle comes in. The reference triangle. So if I want to do trig with these numbers, if my angle that I'm dealing with is, let's say, 60 degrees, if I'm dealing with that angle, well, I can drop a perpendicular down, and now I have a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. And if this distance here is x, this is y, we could call this the hypotenuse. We could call it r, since these sort of are like circles. And I know all this information about my triangle. For example, if I know that x is, say, 5, then I know that y is 5 root 3. Daddy. Now, can you guys hear Hazel? Okay, so let's say the angle that I was dealing with was not 60 degrees. Let's say it was 120 degrees, like this. Well, this 120 degree angle, when I drop my perpendicular down, guess what? This is 60 degrees. And so now everything that I know about the 30, 60, 90 triangle also applies to a 120 degree angle, because now I've got my 30, 60, 90 and I can do all my trig stuff. But what about reflex angles? What about angles that are greater than 180 degrees? Well, the same stuff applies, but the reference triangle is a little different to figure out. Let's say we have a 200 degree angle. Not all our angles are going to fit our 30, 60, 90 and our 45, 45, 90. Let's say this is 200 degrees. When I drop my perpendicular, I'm always going to do a perpendicular to the x-axis. When I do that, what angle do I have here? Well, I'd figure that out by doing 200 minus this much, 180. I get 20 degrees. 20 degrees. Okay, now I can do trig with this if I know one other piece of information. So my reference triangle that I make has a 20 degree angle in it. What if the angle that I'm dealing with is 322 degrees? Well, I know I'm going to go here. Here's 90, 180, 270, 322. Okay, so here's a 322 degree angle. How do I figure out? I'm going to make my perpendicular. How do I figure out what this angle is? Well, it's a little bit different than this process. I do 360 minus 322, and I would get 38 degrees. So this is a 38 degree angle. And I can do all my trig information with this triangle right here, this with a 38 degree angle in it. And of course, remembering that while my x's are positive, my y's are negative. We'll get more into that later. But just one other piece about the reference triangle, if you're trying to figure out, if you're having trouble figuring out how to draw your reference triangle, think of it as a bow tie. Your perpendicular will always drop either straight down or straight up, and these will be your triangles. Okie dokie, it's a little bow tie.